Minister.
Mrs Engel, I would like to thank the Honourable Lady and the Right Honourable Gentleman for their contributions to the debate on this group of amendments. It's clear that a number of significant points have been raised, and in responding to them, I will set out the Government's approach, as well as moving a number of minor and technical Government amendments. Starting with those, I beg to move Government Amendments 108 to 110, which are three minor and technical amendments tabled by the Government to give Scottish ministers the power to modify additional sections of the Scotland Act 1998 within their devolved competence and clarify the extent to which those and other sections can be modified. Amendment 108 allows the Scottish Parliament to modify sections 1 and 3 to 5 of section 112 of the Scotland Act 1998 to the extent that those subsections apply to any power exercisable within devolved competence to make subordinate legislation. Amendment 109 ensures that the Scottish Parliament can modify sections 112, subsection 1 and 3 to 5, sections 113 and 115 and Schedule 7 to the 1998 Scotland Act, so far as those provisions apply to making subordinate legislation, including orders in council made by Her Majesty in areas of devolved competence. Amendment 110 gives the Scottish Parliament the power to modify Section 124 of the 1998 Scotland Act, so far as that provision applies to making subordinate legislation in areas of devolved competence. These amendments will ensure that the Scottish Parliament can modify how these sections apply to both the subordinate legislation made by the Scottish ministers and to the orders in council made by Her Majesty, which fall within devolved competence, and I beg to move those amendments. Turning to Amendments 62 to 66 and Amendments 21 to 22, these seek to amend Clause 10 of the Bill, which is the clause which fulfils the Smith Commission agreement in requiring certain types of electoral legislation to be passed by a two-thirds majority of the Scottish Parliament, and I thank the Honourable and Right Honourable Members for their amendments. The Government believes its approach to this clause delivers on paragraph 27 of the Smith Commission agreement, which identified that there are certain types of electoral legislation where it is important that there is a broad consensus in favour of that legislation. The Commission agreed that such a procedure should apply to legislation which changes the franchise, the electoral system, or the number of constituency and regional members of the Scottish Parliament. Whilst we will reflect on the points raised in the debate on the amendments, the Government does not support the amendments because we believe that the number of members voting in favour of the legislation that applies under this clause at the final stage should be at least two-thirds of the seats in the Scottish Parliament. We recognise that this means that there will need to be a vote rather than a bill being passed by consensus, but we believe that this implements the intention behind the Smith Commission agreement. As the Smith Commission recognised, the supermajority requirement is an important safeguard of legislative powers, and for this reason I urge honourable members to withdraw the amendments. Amendments 21 and 22, in the name of the Right Honourable Member for Orkney and Shetland, go beyond the Smith Commission agreement, which did not propose that legislation relating to the term length of the Scottish Parliament or the date of any Scottish Parliament ordinary general election should be subject to that two-thirds majority. Neither did the agreement state that the bills concerning the alteration of boundaries of constituencies, regions or any other equivalent electoral area for the Scottish Parliament should be covered by this requirement, and for that reason I would seek to ask the Right Honourable Member to withdraw his amendments.
In principle, why would the parliamentary term length be different from the other functions that she's listed?
To be quite clear, that's what was agreed in the Smith Commission, and his party agreed to that, and we are not we're not planning to go beyond the Smith Commission on this particular arrangement. To Clause 10 of the Bill, to reiterate, it implements paragraph 27 of the Smith Commission agreement, which identified that it is important to have an adequate check on certain types of Scottish Parliament electoral legislation. The Smith Commission recommended that the UK legislation should provide such legislation should be passed by a two-thirds majority of the Scottish Parliament, and the Government agrees that this provides an important safeguard. It is possible, of course, that there may be discussions on whether a particular bill is, in fact, this type of legislation. Clause 10 also allows the Advocate General, the Lord Advocate or the Attorney General to refer to the Supreme Court the question of whether a certain piece of legislation requires a two-thirds majority of the Scottish Parliament. The Supreme Court already provides a similar role on whether a particular matter is within the legislative competence of the Scottish Parliament, and so I'll be begging to move that Clause 10 stand part of the Bill. Turning on to amendments to 67 to 86 and 87 to 88, which concern Clause 11 of the Bill, which delivers on the Smith Commission recommendation to give the Scottish Parliament greater powers in relation to the arrangements and operation of the Scottish Parliament and the Scottish Government. It does this by enabling the Scottish Parliament to modify relevant sections of the 1998 Scotland Act. While I'm sure that the Secretary of State will wish to reflect to ensure the agreed powers work correctly, the Government is clear that substantial new powers devolved under this clause are the right ones. A number of the amendments to Clause 11 would allow further modification of the 1998 Act beyond the scope of the transfer of the powers envisaged by the Smith Commission. The Bill already transfers substantial powers to modify the Act consistent with the Commission, and the Government does not believe it is right to go beyond this. The Honourable Lady from Edinburgh South West in particular referred to Amendment 67. Indeed, earlier, the Right Honourable Member for Orkney and Shetland said that this matter should be consistent across the UK, reinforcing that this is a reserved matter for the UK Parliament and not a devolved matter. The Honourable Lady said that the UK Government had not been clear about aspects of this. I believe that the Prime Minister has been clear at this dispatch box. Amendment 67 would amend the Bill such that paragraph 1 of Schedule 4 to the 1998 Act would be modified to remove the Human Rights Act of 1998 from the list of legislation that the Scottish Parliament cannot modify, otherwise known as the protected enactments. The House will be aware that the Government outlined its proposal to reform and modernise our human rights framework by replacing the Human Rights Act with the Bill of Rights. That was reinforced today by my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, at the celebration of the 800th anniversary of Macarthur earlier today. Of course, we are aware of the possible devolution implications and reform, and we can engage with the devolved administrations as we develop these proposals. As the Secretary of State earlier, the Sewell Convention, as intended by Lord Sewell, has been placed in the Bill, but this Parliament does remain sovereign. The Government is certainly committed to human rights and, will, as I indicated earlier, will consider the devolution implications.
But that's just not good enough. I mean, these are real fundamental, profound issues for the Scottish Parliament, where we are dependent upon the Human Rights Act for the competence of our Parliament. Will she vow to go forward, make sure this is properly looked at, and come back with a more suitable, substantial response to what we've heard just now?
Well, the Honourable Gentleman is right to say that these are important matters, and I can assure you that my right honourable friend here is engaging with the devolved administrations as we develop the proposals. It has to be said that this amendment is squarely out with the Smith Commission agreement. The Honourable Lady herself suggested that this was not a matter for the Scottish Parliament directly, but the Smith Commission agreement contained no proposals in this respect. Turning to Clause 11 substantially, it contains important provisions which transfer substantial new powers to ensure that the Scottish Parliament has a greater role and greater powers to make decisions about the operation and administration of the Scottish Parliament and the Scottish Government. By doing so, Clause 11 delivers a critical element of the Smith Commission package. Amongst other matters, the clause transfers greater powers to the Scottish Parliament over its membership and proceedings and over the composition and powers of the Scottish Government. So I beg to move that Clause 11 should also stand part of the Bill.